You just bought a used carburetor off Marketplace, you got it all cleaned up, inspected, it looks good to go, and you're ready to bolt it on. But before you do, I'm going to give you 3 more things you need to check before you put that used carburetor on. Let's take a look at it. Used carburetors are always tough because you really, when you buy them, unless you disassemble it right there in front of the seller, it's really hard to get a good understanding of what the condition is, how it's been treated, what it looks like on the inside, make sure there's no ethanol, water damage. All those little details need to be looked at. And I buy a lot of used carburetors, so I've gotten to kind of down to a science really, or a checklist really, of what I'm looking for when I'm looking at a used carburetor. But when I make the decision to buy it and I go to rebuild it, there's 3 things that I check that I don't know that anyone spends any time looking at, but they're very important to the operation of the carburetor, and I'm going to show you what those 3 are today. The good news is it doesn't take any really specialty tools to do this. So let's jump right in. I'm going to show you the first one that I checked that's very, very important to how the secondaries operate. And let's take a look at that one right away. When you've bought a used carburetor, there are times when they just haven't been treated that well, and you just need to know what condition it's in. And really the secondary opening is one of the most critical ones. This is a Performer Series carburetor, and we can't control the air valve like we can on an AVS2 type carburetor, and we can't control the weighted air valve without making some really bad modifications to it. We've covered that in another video. But what we need to check to verify on the bottom side is that the secondaries are opening at the right time. If you notice, the primaries will open first and they will get to a certain place, and then the secondaries will start to open up. That's what we need to look at. That's what we need to concentrate on, is where the secondaries begin to meter open and what that looks like in reference to the primary side of the carburetor. So let's do that. I'm going to show you how to take that measurement so you can make sure that those are opening right, and then I'll show you how to adjust it if it's off. Before we take that measurement and I show you how to adjust it, I want to show you something that's a little confusing from what Edelbrock publishes as what that dimension needs to be, meaning when the primary throttle valve opens and the secondary just starts to open, it just starts to have tension on it, that measurement you take, Edelbrock says it's 1330 seconds from the edge of the blade to the base of the bore, or this line on the bore here. So when you take that measurement, you're measuring from the tip of the blade to the edge of the bore. Now, here's the problem with that, is I've got all these cores out here because I'm going to show you how far off that is. And these are carburetors I haven't touched. That is a brand new 1406 that I bought, that we did on the last video for the GMC truck. It's literally, I think the date code is, yeah, it's not even 2 months old, that carburetor, from when it was manufactured. So I know it hasn't been abused or beaten up, or some of these others that are potentially a little neglected or maybe dropped or whatever. And I'm going to show you what that dimension looks like. So let me get the camera down low so you can take a look at. I'm going to start with the 1406 so we can see that, and then we'll measure these others to show you how far off that distance truly is. All we're going to do is we're going to rotate the primaries here. You have to be careful that the fast idle cam and this lockout is completely disengaged. That way it doesn't affect the operation of the secondaries. And all you're going to do is roll the throttle until you feel the secondaries just begin to get some tension on it. That's where you want to go. So then all you do is put your measurement stick up against there. And this one tells me that that is closer to 930 seconds instead of 1330 seconds. Again, brand new carburetor out of the factory. I have not touched it. I certainly know where it came from. I got it directly from the Edelbrock Distribution Center here in Memphis, or Olive Branch, and it hasn't been abused. So let's get another carburetor up here and let's measure it. Here's the 1406 that we built for the GMC. Okay, measure it, and again, we're a little less than 930 seconds there. Okay, so we know that one's off. Okay, here is a 1906. Again, make sure those are good. All right, And this one is, yeah, a little bit more. So a little bit more than 9/30 seconds, but pretty close to it. So again, very, very different carburetors, 3 different carburetors, nowhere near the 13/30 seconds that you're going to measure when you are on the bench doing this yourself. Well, what does that mean exactly? So what that tells me is this linkage that's on here, that's what controls the timing of when those secondaries open up. If you look, it's hard to see, that linkage starts to grab its tension as the primaries are opening, and that is what grabs a hold of the arm, grabs a hold of the throttle shaft going through the secondaries and pulling it through. So that's our adjustment point. We can make it here on that linkage where we bend it and change the timing of that. Now, that's where it becomes kind of complicated. What do you do in this situation if you're at 9/30 seconds and you want to be at that 13/30 seconds, which I don't recommend? What do you do? Well, what you do is you bend this linkage. So let me do that. It's a little complicated. Need to get it into a vise. If you're going to close the distance between the two, just clamp it and pound that down, and it's a lot of trial and error type of deal. Or open it up by just squishing it in the vise, and it'll pinch it. It'll move these two ends further away from each other from the pivot point. So let's do that. We'll remeasure it, and I'll show you what that looks like. So let me go bend that on the vise, and then we'll go from there. These are going to be a little difficult to see, so I'll get a close-up shot. But we opened that one up a little bit. We closed that one down way too much, obviously. We'll see that on the carburetor, and then that's the standard one. So let me do this. Let me get it on the carburetor, and then I'm going to show you how that affected it, or the opening. The standard one's in there. We just measured that, looked at that. So let's look at this one first, where we opened it up too much. Let me get that one installed, and I'll get you a good shot of that. Got that one opened up, and you can you'll see how much closer we got to it. Not too bad. It's actually really spot on, actually, so don't bend those too much, so it's kind of interesting to get that close. The problem with that, though, is there is wide open throttle with it, so you can tell just how far open that goes if you're going to get it to that 13/16. The problem with that is you delay how quickly or when the secondary is open tremendously if you make that big adjustment. Now, the good news is if you want to really delay when your secondaries kick in, if you've got a really strong torque engine, if you've got a really low RPM street application and you're not trying to get into those secondaries very aggressively, it could be a good adjustment for you. But as far as a standard adjustment goes, 13/16, don't like it. That 13/30 seconds, I think I probably said that a few times now that I think about that, but that 13/30 seconds is not really a good measurement, not in my estimation. That 9/30 seconds is pretty good. We kind of dial that back. That's kind of where it started from, and that's where we adjusted to. I like that adjustment way better, that 9/30 seconds. So I'm not opposed to sticking to it, but yeah, that's where it is. Now let's go the other way with it and collapse it down, and we'll make that linkage change, and we'll show you what that looks like. Here's that where we pinch that down, and you can see almost immediately how quickly that secondary opens up. Now, if you were in a really aggressive situation where you wanted that secondary to hit a lot harder, a little bit more aggressive cam, a little bit more racing profile, then sure, closing that gap down might not be a bad idea. Let's see what that measurement looks like. We're almost at down to 1/8 of an inch there. So it's really interesting to see how big of a difference that adjustment can make on that linkage. and how aggressive you can get. Now, again, these carburetors really aren't meant for that, but if you want a situation where you want to really snap that secondary open quicker, it's not a one-to-one by any stretch, but you're certainly turning the characteristics of that carburetor way more aggressively by snapping that throttle open so quickly. So it's a really good adjustment. I like it, but I will tell you very candidly, I very rarely make it. If anything, a lot of times I will open it up like we saw in that first example to delay the secondary opening up. Very rarely do I go this route, but I've made that adjustment very frequently, I guess. A couple of times a year I may do this, but again, not very often. So anyway, just thought you would like seeing that. It's a very cool adjustment. Certainly very interesting on how quickly you can open those secondaries, or how slowly you can open them up if your tuning situation requires it. Here's another one that kind of gets looked over. Again, when you buy a used carburetor and you have no idea what the condition is, a lot of times they get bumped or dropped, or sit on a shelf somewhere and something gets slammed up against it. This little stop that's designed to keep the secondaries from opening up. That way the primaries and everything open up in order. These are the secondaries, that's primary. That tab keeps it from opening. There's the linkage that connects the two that we just adjusted a minute ago. It's just there to do that. Now, you want a certain little gap in between there. What Edelbrock suggests is 40 thousandths, so just take a feeler gauge, run it through there. It's a little bit more than that, but that's okay. And when you activate the throttle, primary opens first, then the secondary comes down, well, we have to get the, there we go. Kind of hard to do that when I'm got the other side pushed up against the bench, but it's just designed to keep that secondary from over operating or operating out of order. So that's all it is, and that's all that little measurement is. Again, I see that very frequently where that tab's bent, because like I say, the more that kind of sits on the bench or whatever, that tab sticks out of there, easy to do. So 40 thousandths between that primary stop and the secondary. All right, last little one here. This one is just kind of how the choke is in reference to the fast idle cam and how far open that choke can be when everything is at wide open throttle. Again, all this is just an adjustment. Let me get that fast idle off there. And all I'm doing is I'm holding open the throttle plates, and what you're doing is you are seeing how far open the choke is at this point. So again, throttle plates are completely held open. You are wide open throttle. Choke is off, lockout is off. And what you're going to do is you're going to measure how far open that choke is. You're looking for 1/4 inch to 5/16. And we are right at a little bit less than 1/4 inch. So in this case, all we would do is we would take this rod or this stop and bend it a little bit so it will contact this a little bit sooner. Keep that choke plate open a little bit more. So a little tweak. You got to be careful with that one. It can very easily, if you make that adjustment too many times, or if you go too far, you will rotate that off. It usually bends or breaks right there. In that case, you've got no adjustment to make, and you're pretty much done at that point. So again, all you're looking for at this case is just the reference between everything, especially between the choke and that fast idle cam, is all you're really verifying. That's the hard part about buying used carburetors. You just don't know what condition they're in. If they were something that you bought new, then yeah, if you've treated it really well, taken good care of it, and even if you're not quite sure, these little adjustments or measurements are always a good thing to verify on occasion. Again, this AVS2 is sat on the shelf for a while. I may end up using it on some other test, but before I do, it's always good just go through and re-verify that everything is where it's supposed to be. It operates the way it's supposed to. That way, when you are making adjustments to the choke, to the throttle, whatever the case may be, that you know that everything is operating correctly. And that carburetor is going to perform exactly the way you want it to as you're making adjustments, tuning adjustments, whatever the case may be. So not very common adjustments or not very common things to check, but certainly ones that I'll do very routinely, especially if I'm buying a used carburetor. I'll go through and re-verify again. You just never know how it was treated in the past, and those adjustments are there to help you tweak it and make it a little bit better performing as you are going through and making your adjustments. So if you got any questions on those three little deals, or if you want to see more of these little tips on what little things to check, certainly there are some ones in there that can be used to your advantage when you're going through the tuning process, especially when you're talking about when the secondary is open. That one's a very common one. That one I'm probably, of the three, or the one that I'm using the most or looking at the most. So anyway, you got any questions, leave them down below. Be happy to answer them for you. And yeah, we'll catch you guys on the next one. We'll see you.